I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia to introduce an address by the head of state.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I have the immense honor of introducing the video filmed by His Excellency, President of the Republic of Colombia, Iván Duque Márquez, on the occasion of the celebration of the 75th debate of the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, General Assembly Volkan Bozkır, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Antonio Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Heads of Mission. For me, it is an honor to be once again before this Assembly on behalf of the people of Colombia. Above all, on a year like this, when we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Organization. This is a milestone in the decision of nations, sisters in democracy, to find and open spaces for common growth. My country, Colombia, has understood the importance of dialogue to overcome obstacles, the urgent need for a frank conversation to find points of agreement. For this reason, we are the example of a long tradition of participation in the multilateral stage. This year, to cite a few examples, we became member number 37 of the OECD, and we will receive the pro tempore presidencies of ProSur and the Pacific Alliance. This shows our commitment to multilateralism. It is part of a regional commitment in the search for joint solutions, which will lead us within the framework of the call of the United Nations Organization to ensure that no one is left behind. The rapid loss of biodiversity is currently one of the great world problems. The current situation has shown us a close relationship between human health and ecosystem health. The decrease in ecosystems puts our very existence as a species at risk. Colombia stands out by being the second country in the world with the greatest biodiversity per square kilometer. We are fortunate to have 50% of the Andean high plains in a territory which is composed in 30% of Amazon jungle. Colombia has achieved an accumulated reduction of 3.9 million tons of CO2. We have fought against deforestation as never before in the history of our country. We thus include the defense of our environment as a national security objective. In this way, we have reduced and continue to reduce deforestation by 19% in the past 2 years through the Artemisa campaign. We execute our decision to make diversity a strategic asset, and we have thus recovered over 6,000 hectares of natural national parks and prevented 23,000 hectares of forests from being lost. We have also planted more than 35 million trees, bringing us closer to our target of 180 million for 2022. The increase in renewable energy capacity is another front on which we have made progress in the fight against climate change. While in 2018 we had 30 megawatts of capacity connected to the national network, we have extended that capacity by almost 5 times a day, adding 140 more megawatts. And our target is to continue growing to reach a 20-fold expansion in comparison with what we had in 2018, so that by 2022, our country will have more than 2,200 megawatts. We also ratify our commitment to make the Minamata Convention a reality, and we also are making progress as a nation in the law banning the use of asbestos and in the promotion of the use of electric vehicles. We are also awaiting the adoption by the National Congress of the so-called Escazú Agreement, which we signed at the end of last year. The Leticia Agreement, which I announced within this Assembly last year, responds in part to the Government of Colombia's appeal, and we have joined 7 states to implement an action plan which contains 52 specific actions for the sustainable development and conservation of the Amazon region, recognizing its importance as a strategic ecosystem for the planet. Colombia has achieved the association of 2,800 families in the Amazon region to cattle and livestock reconversion and to the production of non-timber forest resources. Also, more than 17,000 indigenous families are benefiting from governance and sustainable economy projects. 15,000 are under schemes of payment for environmental services, covering almost 219,000 hectares, a demonstration of what we are achieving with a view to the future. And as we have led actions to protect the Amazon, tropical forests, and the oceans, we want to call on all nations of the planet to protect the ecosystems in the high plains. Colombia is the home of half of the Andean high plains or moors in the world. Today, I invite you to support us in creating a global strategy to defend the high moors, with which we guarantee the survival of these ecosystems and the sustainability of the communities living there. These areas, these high plains, are true factories of drinking water and the place where water sources are born and irrigate and then go on to irrigate a large part of our territory. That is why the call also extends for the nations of the world to provide resources and to understand that the protection of the high plains is a universal duty. Colombia is a marvelous country, inhabited by men and women who are as diverse as our nature. We have experienced violence and poverty, and this is why we are committed to build a sustainable future based on equity. Real peace is the social decision to build prosperity based on truth, solidarity, adherence to law, and a strong rejection of any form of violence. This government has designed a peace policy based on social stabilization and institution building of the territories most historically affected by violence and poverty. The policy of peace with legality is benefiting over 6 million Colombians across the country with an investment of over $780 million, supporting the over 13,500 former combatants and also changing their lives, but changing them with to give them a legal direction with guarantees of non-repetition for over 9 million victims. I want to take this space to honor the victims of violence in my country, and I also wish to extol the work of all of those who daily make the myriad efforts which are needed. These efforts create reality, social leaders who build a society with greater dignity, greater generosity, and who, despite the difficulties, do not flag in their determination to build a country for everybody. To them and to all Colombians, we acknowledge the vocation of building a future, to do so by closing wounds and healing them, but at the same time so that fraternity in the framework of legality will make us feel proud. Today in Colombia, there is no dichotomy between friends and enemies of peace. Today, we are one country which moves forward, whether the wind is behind us or not. Multilateral tools have been key for the contribution of the international community to this purpose. especially with regard to reparations to victims, strengthening rural development, formalizing property in the remote regions of our country. I wish to highlight and thank the verification mission of the United Nations for their support. They bear outstanding witness to the major progress of our government towards reaching a rule-based law, in other words, or rather, a rules-based peace. In other words, a true peace. Unfortunately, all the efforts we are making have a common threat hanging over them: drug trafficking and the illicit economy they generate. For my country, the fight against drug trafficking is an ethical imperative because it breeds all kinds of corruption. It participates in all of the chains of crime, and it is a seed of social degradation. Drug trafficking feeds trafficking in persons, arms trafficking, illegal mining, deforestation, and smuggling. Drug trafficking breaks families. It destroys social values. It constantly threatens the lives of millions of people across the world, and it promotes inequality, sowing hatred, violence, and death in otherwise peaceful lands. Drug trafficking goes beyond borders. My country, Colombia, has been a victim of this heinous act. This transnational crime calls for the joint action of all states with a sentiment of co-responsibility. And it is in these common challenges where we must act hand in hand, without any doubt, with energy and without any hesitation. The situation created by COVID-19 has also become a threat that heightens social inequality. This world crisis has shown both the strengths and the weaknesses of multilateral tools. On the one hand, it showed that we still need to define better mechanisms for cooperation in crises. At the same time, these tools have led to the search for joint solutions to overcome the crisis. For example, when it comes to acquiring vaccines. The shared work with organizations like the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization have been crucial during this entire year and will continue to be crucial while we seek possible solutions for this crisis. Mechanisms such as COVAX, in which Colombia is actively participating, are fundamental for several nations to cooperate in the search for and distribution of a possible vaccine. Solidarity between nations and ongoing cooperation are essential if we wish to come through this time of pandemic successfully. The pandemic is a turning point to think of a sustainable and fair future. Now that we are about to reactivate our economies and our productive life, environmental sustainability must be the meeting point for the building of a more sustainable, responsible world. Within this framework, the protection of regional democracy is a fundamental element. Threats to democracy we see today are threats to the freedom of nations, and they also prevent regional integration and cooperation to overcome challenges such as the one that humanity is currently facing. The dictatorial regimen of Maduro is supported with drug trafficking resources. They harbor terrorists, and it is a constant threat for democracies in the region and the world. Ongoing violations of human rights by the Maduro dictatorship, which we denounce in our country and have denounced in international fora, including the International Criminal Court, have recently been confirmed by the United Nations organization. Why? Because in Venezuela, what they seek to do with crimes against humanity is to perpetuate tyranny. And everyone, absolutely everyone in the international community must reject that situation. We need to make a strong call to all nations of the world to raise their voices and call for truly free elections, and not the prefabricated electoral orchestra to which they intend to lead the Venezuelan people in this month of December, simply to perpetuate the dictatorship. This is the reason why we must reject this process, which seeks to legitimize Maduro's dictatorship. Today, Colombia tells the world that we view the future with optimism, with head held high. We call on the leaders of the world to come closer together as never before, ever since this organization has existed, so that together we can overcome the unprecedented difficulties that these times have put before us. I'm certain that in our own humanity is our greatest strength. I'm convinced that when we look back and recall these difficult months, we will find resilient peoples who stood up to history and with wisdom were able to make their way through the tempest. Distinguished presidents and heads of delegation, the future is in our hands. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Colombia for the statement just made. I now give the floor